Okay, excellent. We are now recording. Thank you very much. Let's move on. So, LEED version 4, as well as other transparency initiatives in various marketplaces, are encouraging environmental disclosure and transparency from the building materials category. With LEED version 4 being discovered in project specifications and construction documents, the pursuit of and inquiries for disclosure reports will result in a learning curve until all stakeholders, including the professional design services, contractors, and material suppliers, learn the new LEED criteria and what response is really necessary for LEED projects. This presentation discusses our industry's average, our industry-wide environmental product declaration, the regional benchmark report, how and why we want to refer to it and utilize it in correspondence. Generally, for the agenda, we're going to generalize the trends of transparency. We're going to look at the transparency within the construction industry and specifically LEED and the material resources credits. We'll talk about our industry-wide EPD, the regional benchmark report, and why does transparency really matter? Why do we want to consider this? And hopefully we'll have time for Q&A at the end. But the real intent of this webinar is to put disclosure in the perspective, in the context of a business opportunity perspective, and how you can utilize the resources that NRMCA has developed to keep our industry competitive. You know, I always lead my presentations, and whoever has seen me present in the past, I always lead it with the same opening, and that's the first bullet point on this slide. We are marketing in the age of transparency. We are seeing greater investment by decision makers into evaluating the risks associated with organizations, product manufacturers, and the supply channel. Most market sectors, whether it's technology or transportation or the industrial sector, government, financial sectors, they're all requesting more information from suppliers to make informed and responsible and long-term business decisions for the pursuit of low-risk relationships. And that is really no different than when it comes to products also. And specific to products, over the past 40 years, there's been an ongoing shift in how manufacturers are validating their claims, their product claims. The x-axis, although it's titled Product and Enterprise Transparency, can almost be considered a chronology of making environmental claims on products where we are moving away from self-declared claims that are unverified. We're passing through the third-party verification and certification of single attributes, and we're moving towards these verified multi-attribute, multi-impact verification of reports such as environmental product declarations. And there are additional reporting on the horizon pertaining to health hazards within material ingredients, disclosing that, and as well as organizational sustainability, the environmental, social, and governance practices of companies and their suppliers. So NRMCA, we monitor these, we try to identify these trends and how that's going to provide insight for those who are interested in pursuing greater levels of disclosure and transparency. But please note that this trend is moving in this direction. This third column that says LCA EPD multi-impacts, that is the crux of this presentation, and something that we're all material suppliers are starting to struggle with understanding the criteria. Why do we need to go through this process? Why is transparency and disclosure important to us? And hopefully we'll give you some ideas and some answers to that as we go through this presentation. So, but for the construction industry, it is the United States Green Building Council. It's driving transparency into the LEED rating system. Now, please note that there are other green building standards, systems, codes, initiatives in the marketplace. We'll just be talking about the LEED, but there is some repeatability of the criteria in LEED with some of these, and transparency is a factor that a lot of these organizations, a lot of these systems are trying to embrace. Since the 1990s, LEED continues to evolve, and transparency and disclosure is being embedded throughout all of its processes, not only with the credits, within it, but even its overall process of how it's eventually going to reveal operational numbers and data. And so they're trying to be more transparent throughout their whole entire organization and the process of LEED. And most recently, with LEED and their versions 4.0 and 4.1 that you can see highlighted in red on the screen, these are the tools that the USGBC is trying to drive and elevate the level of disclosure. Now, LEED has integrated to what I refer to as the product transparency credits. Within the materials and resources category, within the LEED rating system, there are several credits that are driving product disclosure, such as a product's environmental impact, as communicated through an environmental product declaration report, a manufacturer's environmental social governance, their organizational and supply chain practices, and how that's being reported, and also a product's the health hazards that exist within a product and how a report or a manufacturer is revealing them and disclosing them, all those hazards through various types of reports. Although we'll discuss the industry-wide EPD as a tool to respond to the EPD credits, please keep in mind that these additional disclosures are on the horizon, and I expect that we will engage in greater conversation and dialogue in the future to understand our position as an industry regarding this and your position as a material supplier to the marketplace and what that may mean for you from a business opportunity and or a risk, a market risk. So the thinking behind transparency can be visualized here in this endless loop where by reporting, by disclosing within a report encourages a better evaluation. And that eventually drives a preferred selection or specification, which then pressures the market to be more innovative with lowering company and or product negative impacts, and then report why they are better to be selected as a preferred supplier, and so on, and so on, and so on in this loop. This transparency loop is not specific to the building industry and material suppliers within the building industry, as I've personally seen examples in all industries of where this is being adopted. So we're not the only ones that are confronted with this, and it's going across all economic sectors within our business culture. But we're here to talk about environmental product declarations, specifically the M&R, the Material and Resources credit within LEED, and how we as an industry can respond to that. So within the LEED EPD credit, the criteria is basically this. And we have some newer organizations that are just participating in the industry-wide EPD. So we have various levels of understanding and sophistication of the LEED within our membership. So I'm going to try to keep it as basic as possible. If anybody wants to get into greater detail, more strategic discussions on it, that's why I'm here. I am here to support you to provide that strategic outlook of what LEED may mean to your organization or what transparency and disclosure may mean to your organization. But within the M&R credit of EPDs, it's basically this. They want to see a report that identifies specific environmental impacts. That is what option one is all about. And there's various ways to produce a report. You can participate in an industry average, industry-wide, or a generic EPD. They're all considered the same, industry-wide, industry average, generic. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Or you can create an EPD specific to your organization, which would be a product-specific EPD. Please note that in the parentheses for each of those reports, they are trying to push for product-specific EPDs. That is preferable, and that's what's going to be something that will drive disclosure in the future. But for the interim, the industry-wide EPD is an accepted and a compliant document to show contribution to a LEED project. The longevity could be in question as the market slowly shifts to product specific, but we'll monitor that and let you know how that comes along in the next several years. Now, within the EPD criteria also, there's an option 2, and that is basically saying, show me that you have a product that has a lower environmental impact than some comparable products. Now, there can be various ways to show that comparison, but typically we develop through this process, through the process that you participated in through the industry-wide EPD, another report that is a subset of the industry-wide EPD that is called the Regional Benchmark Report. That is what one of the purposes of the Regional Benchmark Report is for those companies that have a product-specific EPD that they want to compare to a proxy in their marketplace to hopefully demonstrate they have a lower environmental impact. That is what the Regional Benchmark Report is for. And again, it can only be used by a company with their own EPDs. You cannot compare the industry-wide EPD to the Regional Benchmark Report. Completely different reports. But the industry-wide is a perfect report, and we'll go into some of the reasons why. Especially for the new participants, this is something that allows you to show compliance on a lead project. So what is the industry-wide EPD? For companies who have not invested in product-specific EPDs, the industry-wide EPD is a stopgap option to demonstrate compliance on lead project. The industry-wide EPD has mixed designs of various compressor strengths, SCM content, lightweight aggregate options, that offers a significant coverage of concrete production, where we believe that the mixed designs in here will provide over 90% of all production in the marketplace. Therefore, the participants will be able to reference this document and reference details within the document on almost all lead projects. It is ideal for smaller companies that haven't invested into their own EPDs. This third version of the reports, we did one in 2012, we followed up with another one in 2016, and now this is our third version in 2020, roughly. It includes 153 companies and subsidiaries and 1,954 plants across the United States, providing fairly good coverage. There are some states that weren't represented, but we have majority of the states, and so we have pretty good coverage for this document to be utilized on almost all lead projects across the U.S. It's not NRMCA's rules, it's the market and USGBC rules that if you didn't participate in this process, you didn't supply operations data, you can't use this document. So those who submitted operations data, those who are on this call, those who are invited on this call, can utilize the reports. I hope this, I only sent out this invitation to this webinar to those who participated. Could it be somebody could have got a hold of the of this registration and sent it to somebody else? There's always that possibility. And we have had experiences where non-participating companies try to utilize the industry-wide EPD, and it made a very uncomfortable conversation with an engineering firm where they try to utilize it and they were not participants. So for your own comfort, you participated, you have access to utilize this document and refer it. It was independently verified through NSF certification, and it is publicly available on their website. They're the verifiers, they're the program operators for this particular EPD, so it has to be publicly listed on their website. If you go to their website, you'll see this document, but you're going to see a whole bunch of other EPDs that they verified from other companies, whether it's in the glass industry or the paint industry or even the concrete industry. So don't be confused when you go to the website and see the listing of this EPD. Although we will, and it is right now linked on our NRMCA website, our sustainability website, we link to their website. We have also some other features on our website and other resources available to our marketplace. But since they are the program operator, the verifier, they have to publicly list it on their site, and that's where it is. So I'm going to try to be very simple on its use. For that option one of the EPD credit, where you can utilize an industry-wide EPD, basically, all we're going to do is this. Whatever mix is specified or what you're submitting on a project, you're going to identify that PSI, compressor strength, and the percentage of fly ash. You're going to go to the table in the beginning of the document and try to find the code within the industry-wide EPD. So the red box I have highlighted The third column is the code. You will scroll through the industry-wide EPD until you find that code, and you will report. Per the criteria, you will report the environmental impacts of that code. And that code is your proxy, is the proxy code for the products that you're submitting on the project. So what I have here is on the left, the image on the left is all of the environmental impacts that's required per standard. The larger image on the right is a subset of the image on the left, and that's what is required to submit on a lead project. So there's not the same criteria of disclosure for environmental impacts between standards as well as lead projects. So what you see on the right is a reference to the code on the right vertical red highlighted rectangular box, and all the various environmental impacts going vertically. And the left red highlighted box are the various types of environmental impacts that USGBC and LEED requires to be reported. Now, this proxy of the mix design, you have to locate it in the report. You know, there's 72 mixes, and they're all have results, and they all have results in both impacts per cubic yard as well as impacts per cubic meter. So make sure, because that's required, that we publish the impacts in both of those units of measurement, units of mass and volume. So therefore, you have to make sure you're staying consistent. If the architect, engineer, and or general contractor is asking information impacts per cubic yard, make sure you're reporting cubic yard. If they're asking it for cubic meter, make sure you're please reporting it in cubic meter. That is basically the use of this. Now, that's basically the use of how to utilize this document. Now, we're going to also talk about other options within the EPD criteria, and I'm going to go into more details on how you may want to correspond this information as we go through this presentation. But the next part of the option is the product-specific EPD. Now, you know, preferably the LEED criteria wants to see materials suppliers that have their own EPDs. This is a process and a cost, so any questions pertaining to this can be directed to me later. However, please note that there are many companies that are investing in their own EPDs for both strategic marketing purposes as well as a reactive response to market forces. So from that, our industry to date has seen a pretty good uptake in EPDs. Now this slide right here, it's our industry, it's a collective industry, also including cement manufacturers as well as aggregate producers. And identifies there's been significant amount of EPDs in our marketplace, and arguably we can be considered a leading industry when it comes to gauging transparency. That's the number of EPDs. But also, if you look at the number of potential mixes within those EPDs, also known as products within EPDs, there's this pretty significant amount of mixes that are within those EPDs. This puts our industry at both an advantage as well as a disadvantage. Our willingness to disclose provides great feedback, positive feedback from project influencers and design professionals, but from an environmental NGOs, environmental activists, this disclosure does influence their initiatives to lower the environmental impacts. And we know that we are receiving a lot of negativity regarding the environmental footprint of concrete and cement. It's a battle that we're facing, but it's a battle that we're not facing alone. You know, other energy-intensive industries are also facing the same battle. This is how we're going to position ourselves moving forward and how we're going to be able to report lower impacts of our products. Going back to the transparency loop as a reference. So we're starting now to see that disclosure, EPDs, and other criteria for transparency is being found in construction documents. We are most likely familiar with this lead reporting form of the past, where we, our industry, in the red highlighted boxes, probably spend a lot of time reporting our regional material contribution, as well as recycled contents in accordance with this form. And this form mostly likely was provided by the general contractor. Personally, I've responded to, in a different, before I came to NRMCA, probably responded to 1,000 projects, lead related projects, because of receiving this form. So myself, I'm intimately familiar with it. But what we're starting to see is new specifications and a new type of form. Specifications being within Division 1, CSI format Division 1 of Sustainable Design Criteria, referencing an environmental materials reporting form, and also something called the BPDO, which is the Building Product Disclosure and Optimization Calculator. Those are two different things. So the environmental reporting form may also be called the BPDO form, so you may see that also. But you also may see some kind of reference to it within a material-specific division within CSI formatting. And here, it's referencing an environmental materials reporting form. And what is that form, and what does that form look like? This is the form. In this format or a similar format, since GCs eventually over time are probably going to brand it, and most likely you're going to receive this from the general contracting community. Although initially, you may see some initial push from architects or engineers or even lead consultants. Historically, the form in general has always been provided through the supply channel, sales channel of the GC. And so therefore, most likely, you'll receive it through that channel, probably up through your concrete contractor. This form requests responses to EPDs in the left box under product, the first row of the product. It asks about sourcing of raw materials, or your responsible company, wood, if you have a supply chain certification system, if you have recycled content in a product. It asks about material health hazards and how are you reporting that. And then in the box on the right, in the first row, it still does talk about regional materials, as it does in the middle of the form for recycled content, but they're trying to de-emphasize those a little bit or make it more strict because they want to enhance these disclosure reports, environmental disclosure reports, raw material health hazard reports, corporate sustainability reports, and things like that. So how effectively and efficiently you respond to those asking the question could result in future bid opportunities or not. So you can simply check the EPD box that I show on the screen here. You can potentially check that box and email, and then an email response back to the general contractor or whoever's asking this question, reference the industry-wide EPD, maybe provide a link to it in an email, acknowledge that you are a participant in the process because that's required. You can do that, or you can be more comprehensive with your correspondence. So one thing that we developed for you to consider, I will send this to you. If you want to be more comprehensive, we developed this 4-page letter developed for your use to modify it, to enhance it, to minimize the content if you choose, or to even brand it. It is to help you think about a marketing communication strategy in addressing your sales channel in this green construction marketplace. So I say green construction marketplace because this information can hold value beyond lead to other potential green building projects that are out there, or also just trying to notify your sales channel, your general contractors, architects, engineers, if you're able to speak to them, to let them know what you can do to help them improve the environmental profile of their products, of their designs, of their initiatives. Note that this is going to be a dynamic process, meaning that more feedback they receive from the sales channel, from the influencers, will improve this communication letter the communications as well as this letter. This template is available right now on the NRMCA Sustainability website, but I will also send it out to everyone as a follow-up email. I'm not going to go through the detail of this letter, but I'm going to provide you some high levels. I want you to review it and for you to digest it and see what's important out of this letter and how you want to consider it for your own marketing communications and your strategy to inform your sales channel of your contribution to lead projects. But it does contain everything that is being asked in that environmental materials reporting form, or also known as the building products disclosure and optimization form. It does touch base on all of those items. From a high level, the letter addresses the project team, it references the project. If you can get a registration of that lead project, that helps out with your own tracking. It helps out with your correspondence to your sales channel to let them know that you are familiar with this project, that you know it is a LEED certified. If you don't have that information, I can work with you. You have to be a LEED or a USGBC member to gain access to the registration list of projects, and I can work with you to provide projects if you want to input that into your correspondence. Obviously, you're having your point of contact and you're having your company's name. You're providing some general information about your organization. The first page just provides a high-level summary, touching base on a lot of the environmental materials reporting form that will be most likely, again, delivered to you through the general contractor. This, again, provides a summary table and then subsequent details are in following pages, but not all of them are going to be applicable at this time. It depends on where you are in your investment into transparency and disclosure. But it's definitely something you'll need to consider as market forces push for greater transparency. There's details pertaining to environmental product declaration. Who's the program operator of the verified EPD? What type of EPD is it? Is it an industry-wide or generic EPD, or is it a company-specific EPD? Are you comparing something to show a lower impact? These are potentially some very complex discussions. So if you want to reach out to me later on, we can have those discussions. But remember, again, for that option 2 in the letter, you're going to be referencing the regional benchmark reporting. You have to have the company-specific EPD for that. Within the EPD, I suggest a couple different options how you want to respond. Simply, if you want to just put some links to the industry-wide EPD, in the link, on our website, we have a directory of all participants. You can link to that directory and suggest that they search for that information on your behalf. Or in an option B, I suggest an appendix that gives in a little more detail that you provide that information. And that image, the smaller image on the right, is a quick capture of the appendix A, going into detail, providing a little bit more insights on the mixes, the environmental impacts, how they're referenced or which page they're referenced to within the industry-wide EPD, and then maybe taking a snapshot of your particular directory listing to show that you are a participant in that process. But you have a lot of freedom to do what you want. This letter is just providing suggestions. It also provides some details pertaining to health hazards and material ingredients, recycled. We're on the sourcing. On the supply chain certification in which your recycled content provides some information regarding that. It also provides health hazard information. What kind of report have you invested into that reveals hazards within your products? What does that mean? Low emitting materials, that's another criteria that's usually asked for, but concrete for the most part is deemed as an inherently low emitting material, and therefore you don't have to really submit any emissions testing data. But always note that if there's sealers or there's coatings that are used on protecting concrete, the provider of those products probably will have to report some kind of report that shows VOC content or other disclosure reports. And the regional material, something that you're familiar with from before, allows you the ability to report where all your raw materials come from in proximity to the project site. Now, two things about this regional material which has turned into potentially a pain in the butt for us. One, the criteria has been reduced from previous lead versions 3.0 and earlier, which was 500 miles. Lead version 4.0 and 4.1 is taking that distance down to 100 miles. Previously, we were able to report percent by weight, so any percent by weight. Now with lead version 4, if you can see the note on the bottom of the slide, they consider it has to be an entire product must be within 100 miles of that project site, meaning your aggregate must come from 100 miles, within 100 miles your cement, if you have SCM or any other ingredients, must come from 100 miles of the project site. Manufactured and or extracted, not necessarily at a terminal. You have to go back to the actual manufacturing or extraction. Now, they do consider 90% by weight to be considered an entire product. So where we had a lot of opportunities in the past to report a percent by weight, we're restricted now to 90% or higher. And if we don't have that 90%, we may not be able to be reporting this regional material. But that's all this is in the letter, which will be available to you, is currently available to you on our website, and I'll send it out for you to take a look at. Okay, but the reason why we put this together, this letter, as well as the need to consider a greater communication strategy for these projects, is really for this reason. That environmental materials reporting form, or also known as that building product disclosure and optimization form, is going to be sent out to all material suppliers, and most likely sent by the general contractor, or it could be a lead consultant that's working on the project. They will be sending this out to dozens, if not 100, different material suppliers, depending on the project size. They have to collect all this information from concrete, mason products, metals products, wood products, thermal, moisture protective products, opening, finishes. So drywall and glass and steel and wood and concrete and carpeting and paints. They're collecting all this information from all these suppliers, and they need to aggregate all that information when pursuing these credits within LEED. And then they have to eventually upload this electronically to what they call LEED Online. LEED Online is the project administrators, the project team that's working on this LEED project. So they have visibility into some of these credits, how they're achieving credit criteria and compliance. This is a lot of work for the general contractor. Anything that we can do to ease their job, to ease their workload, hopefully provides us better reputation and evaluation for that next product. Thinking about that transparency loop and how do we manage our communications. So I'm going to shift gears just briefly and talk about the regional benchmark. This is only a couple slides, but I think you'll understand, I think you kind of understand its use and eventually maybe a greater use of this regional benchmark. When developing our industry-wide EPD, we also completed this regional benchmark report. It is different than the industry-wide and it should be used together. They're completely separate documents. The regional benchmark allows for pursuing that credit to option within environmental product declarations where you want to compare product to another product. This regional benchmark report serves as those proxies per the region. So if you're a manufacturer that is creating your own environmental product declarations in the California marketplace, you compare it to the regional benchmark of the California marketplace. Well, it's more than California, but in that region, to see how your products compare to your regional benchmarks. That is what the purpose of the regional, that's the primary purpose of the regional benchmark. But also it's becoming a very good document that we want to consider citing, because we're starting to see some state and local initiatives that are prescribing EPDs, and they're setting potential maximum environmental impacts within EPDs. And some of these state and local initiatives, codes, legislation, and other initiatives are maybe coming up with their numbers themselves. But this report is the one we should be utilizing to influence those local initiatives. So for a product manufacturer who has their own EPD, they will simply compare to that particular region within the regional benchmark report. Make sure you're referencing the same exact products and see how the impacts are different between the two, with the hopes that you are actually producing a product that has a lower environmental impact than the benchmark. That's the idea behind this. And if you're not, this hopefully gives you an opportunity to start to reformulate, think about lower environmental impact raw materials that will also lower the environmental impact of concrete products. So again, I just want to briefly talk about, we're starting to see this legislation and codes, and just to know that when it comes to this regional benchmark report, and as a subset to the industry-wide environmental product declaration, we together, you and us, through our consultants, Athena, together we are collecting the data for our industry. Together, we are the ones that should be informing, influencing these local and state codes and legislation and other types of things that we're starting to see. We should be the ones presenting that information. We are the ones that should be presenting typically what our global warming potential impacts are for our mixed designs. We shouldn't be allowing them to define that for ourselves. That's another reason for this regional benchmark report, and I hope it gets that usage moving forward. So why does this all matter? Why does transparency matter from a market perspective? Going from left to right, this is basically LEED version 2.2 projects, LEED version 2009, also known as LEED version 3 projects, and then on the far right in orange, these are LEED version 4 projects that we're starting to see in the marketplace. The LEED version 4 and 4.1, there's a little over 3,923 out there that would be requiring that environmental materials reporting form should be completed. The numbers of LEED project registrations obviously are not like the heyday of late 2008, 2009, or even in 2016 before they transitioned to a new version. There's always a huge spike in LEED registrations. However, there's a lot of other things happening in the marketplace. There's a lot more LEED equivalent buildings where they don't want to spend the money for registration, but we'll still go through the same exact process by asking for that environmental materials reporting form. We would still have to supply that information. There are other green building rating systems like the Living Building Challenge and Green Globes and BREEAM that are starting to move and gain more market share that would impact these numbers. So there's a lot of other things that are happening, and although these numbers are not as robust as in past LEED projects, I do think that there's sufficient trend analysis and this is going to continue, and we are still going to have to be involved within these disclosure and transparency reporting. No, it's not going to happen for everybody on this call at the frequency than some of the other ones. We have particular marketplaces that are much more invested into LEED construction than others. So, but I would feel very comfortable that eventually all markets will realize a LEED project and that your participation in that industry-wide EPD is going to give you that opportunity to show compliance on that LEED project. So it also doesn't matter because, Gensler, if you look at the title of this slide, this is a very large architectural firm that's saying, hey, we want EPDs. And they're saying, if you don't spec it, you won't get it. So again, supporting that we're starting to see the construction documents, They're wanting to see this. They want to make decisions on products and materials based on the environmental impacts that are displayed within a disclosure report, such as an EPD. And so we have drivers from the professional design services that are asking for this information also. We also compete against other product categories. Us being Division 3, concrete, but there's a whole bunch of EPD activity going on in other product categories that are trying to take our position in those buildings. And we have to be cognizant of that also. Price and performance is still going to dominate. However, in procurement of products nowadays, environmental impacts are starting to get closer to the top 3 or 4, top 5 decision aspect when it comes to selecting products. Same chart as I just showed, but in a different view. This is a stack chart. This is just to show from the bottom going up, bottom in the blue line, Division 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then the dark blue at top, Division 9. You see growth that is occurring over the years of EPD investment and activity. And you've seen a big jump after this LEED version 4 became available in the marketplace. So you're seeing a lot of money by a lot of different companies in different product categories investing in the EPDs. And the reason why I show this is to give you an indication that it's not me saying to you this is important. It's not me telling you that I think you should do this. I just want to show you activities and try to quantify them of what's in the marketplace to help you decide whether the business case for you is to go beyond the industry-wide EPD and to consider your own disclosure reporting. As well, we're starting to see a pretty significant growth of legislation in the state and local level that we're tracking and we're trying to influence, that wants to see EPDs that are putting some restrictions on the environmental impacts of products as communicated through an EPD. And again, that's where our regional benchmark report comes in. So the market is wanting EPD through market-based trends such as LEED. We're also starting to see legislative demands for EPDs that we need to influence. And most importantly, well, not that those other ones weren't as important, but significantly important, is that we want to control our own information. The example that I have on this screen for you was supplied on a project by the concrete contractor, and it is full of errors, and it was not provided by the concrete producer. We cannot allow the market control our information. We have to understand what the criteria is. We have to understand how to communicate that, and we need to control the distribution of that information in a way that effectively and efficiently puts us at an advantage with that decision maker, whether it's the architect, whether it's the engineer, but most likely the general contractor. We need to move down the sales channel and start having more conversation with those influencers. This type of information will allow you to move further down the sales channel for those who want to have a more robust market strategy and communication strategy. So from a high level, before I take some questions and give you something to ponder, some high-level takeaway notes of this presentation. There's significant trends of transparency in the marketplace. In our industry, our construction sector, as well as many other sectors in the marketplace. Pressure from architects and engineers are being required to be more transparent. In general, contractors are typically the messengers for that. LEED version 4.0 and 4.1 are being discovered in construction documents and specifications. The concrete industry, we're one of the first to disclose environmental impacts and continue to be positioned to meet these disclosure demands as identified with the continuing investment of our industry to disclose. Growing disclosure from competing product categories is something that we have to contend with because we want that space on the building. We don't want them to have that. You have the LEED letter. Digest it, review it, modify it, to meet your branding and your own communication strategy. Reference the benchmark report to influence local legislation, regulations, code standards, as well as if you have your own company-specific EPD to use as a proxy for comparison to show lower environmental impacts, hopefully lower environmental impacts. A lot of our resources are available on our NRMCA.org sustainability site. Our EPD site is within that also. You can see various EPDs that are published. You can find the letter on our website. This presentation within the next couple of days will be linked on our website as well as this recording. And then lastly, reach out for customized strategic decisions for business case to be more transparent. I am here to help you. My various experiences before NRMCA has put me in various publicly traded organizations, global organizations that have crossed many market sectors, and I have seen a lot of this transparency and disclosure firsthand. So if you would like my perspective and I can be helpful with your own strategic plans and discussions, please include me with that. Let me help you. Let me help you help yourselves in the marketplace. Now, let me just offer this to you when you think about transparency. It's a little visual to consider when considering the future of transparency. Virtually every technology has advanced significantly in the past several decades. So what seemed so remarkable in 1984, Pluto, and today doesn't seem so remarkable today. Now, apply that to IT platforms, big and shared data, social media, virtual connections, and artificial intelligence. What does that mean for our industry in the future? So let me ask you as a final thought. Do you think as an industry we can avoid marketing in the age of transparency, knowing these technologies are becoming more available and disclosure and transparency is easier to disclose and report on? So I'm going to provide a thank you right now, and I'm going to go to questions. Let me see if we have any questions. And interesting, we have no questions, which is fine. Hopefully that means that we're good to go. So I'm going to stop recording this, and I will be sending this out to everyone. And please expect that to arrive in your inbox within a day or so. And please note that I will be able to I'm always available to help you with your own communication letter and how you want to address this throughout your sales channel. So I want to thank you very much for your participation. It's very important for our industry to engage in transparency. This industry-wide EPD is one of the tools that we can offer our marketplace to show our level of participation and compliance, and we want to enhance that as we move forward in the marketplace in years to come. And I thank you very much for your willingness to participate in the industry-wide EPD. So I'm going to stop recording now, and I just want to thank everyone.